walk away from a conversation and the words you wish you had said in that conversation suddenly pop into your head just about 10 seconds too late? We can't keep that from happening every time, but we do have advice for those mother-daughter moments you wish you could do over. My next guest is sharing words and phrases for everyday conversation to help moms and daughters form that connection. We're after Dr. Jennifer Cummings joins me. She's an expert in interpersonal communications and an assistant professor at the University of Utah. It's great to have you here, and I love this topic. You've done some extensive research on this topic. You're also a mom with a 14-year-old daughter, so you get it. Do the words we say in those conversations really make a connective difference?
They make such a difference, and it's partly the words. It's not like they're magic words and words that will fail you every time, but it's the sentiment behind the words that can be so helpful and healing or explosive. So we really have to be careful in the words we choose and the tone that we say them.
And do you find a little pre-thought toward these words, toward these phrases will make a difference? Because in the moment, we've all been there. Something will come bubbling out of your mouth and you know it's not quite the right thing to say. Yes. So a little mental practice can go a long way, I imagine.
Definitely. And sometimes you want to think about words that I should just never say. I'm just going to avoid those, and some that will be pretty safe most of the time.
Let's go there. You've got a list for us. Words to avoid. You never, you always, you should have. Kind of those absolutes.
Yes. Yeah. They're so extreme, and they give the other person no credit for anything that they're doing well. So we're really going to avoid the always and the never, and framing it as a you feels like lobbing a hand grenade. And what it does is it triggers a response of, well, you never, or you always do this. So in one conversation, I always think of this mother-daughter pair that in 3 minutes they had done 45 you statements of back and forth. It was so volatile, and it was really destructive, and they both just ended up feeling terrible.
Well, the walls go up the second you feel accused, first of all. And then when you're drawing those absolute lines, like you said, I mean, talk about cementing those walls. It immediately just feels defensive.
Yeah, it makes everybody shut down, and it really brings out the worst accusations and the worst in each other.
All right, I have to admit, this next word that landed on your words to avoid list totally shocked me, because I would think why would be a natural way, especially in preteens and teenagers, to draw out more detail, draw out more conversation. Why is why not so great to reach for in those situations?
Okay, and this is all in how you say it. So why, if it's asked sincerely, can be a good question. Why are you thinking that? Why does this mean so much to you? Would work fine.
Okay.
The problem is when why sounds like, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Why did you think that was a good idea?
Gotcha.
And it can sound so accusatory and condemning. So I call these kinds of questions pseudo questions or hot questions, because they're really not genuine questions. They're kind of a judgment. We've already made up our mind how we feel about what you did.
We don't really want the answer.
Yeah, and we're not really asking a question. We're just saying, did you really think that was a good idea? And it's a hot question because it makes the other person defensive immediately and criticizes what they did. It's not sincere.
So it's the tone. It's the
really
meaning
the tone
behind the question.
But why usually triggers that kind of tone of, I have to explain myself or defend myself.
I can meet you there. I'm sure every mom of a teenage daughter, a preteen daughter, has been on the receiving end of the word whatever. Yeah. Usually met with kind of toss of the hair and eye roll, right?
Yes.
Why is this so destructive to a conversation?
Okay, so whatever is another one that can be innocent and fun if it's done right. So sometimes you'll hear a mother or a daughter pair say whatever after they've just kind of realized we're not going to see this the same way.
You're exasperated, you're done, your hands are in the air, whatever.
And if you mean it in a way of like, well, we'll just agree to disagree, then it's going to work okay for you. But when the issue really means a lot to one of the people and the other one throws out a whatever, it can be so hurtful.
It's like they're blowing it off.
Yes, this isn't important to me anymore, or you're not important to me, or you're just being crazy, or so it sends a message that I'm giving up on this or on you. So you want to watch that kind of whatever being too flippant if it really means something to the other person.
It seems that could be a good, I'm not the expert here, but a goal-setting opportunity where I'm not going to say that if you don't say that. Because it comes out of, I think, young girls' mouths just as much as it comes out of mom's mouth.
Yeah, it definitely does. It goes both ways.
And it can be a trigger on both sides. Now that we know what not to say, let's get to some words to help diffuse tension and maybe keep that communication going. I love this first phrase. You're encouraging moms out there to say, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, the more positivity and the more acknowledgement we can give each other about what we're doing well. What I've noticed is mothers and daughters in these relationships are hungry to know we're doing something right. We're both trying. It's a relationship that means a lot to both people, even though it can be a little volatile and tense at times. But when we can say, I noticed you doing this, or you're so good at this, you really try hard, and you'll hear one or the other say something that's kind of a plea to acknowledge me, like, like, I've been trying really a lot harder on my homework lately. For a mom to say, I've noticed that. You're right. You really have, and I've noticed a difference in your grades. Or a mom will say, I don't really bother you as much about your room as I could. And for the daughter to say, yeah, that's true. My room is a mess and I should do better.
So
and
you're
pretty easy
modeling
on
that
me.
behavior too.
You're really modeling it. And you're giving each other a break and giving credit for what you're doing well.
My love language, you know, those 5 love languages is words of validation. But I think to some extent that applies to almost every human being. We love to be validated. We love to be acknowledged. And so sending that acknowledgement, that validation to a 13-year-old mind, I imagine would go a long way.
Yes, even when they act like they don't care what you think, they desperately care. They want to know they're good, they're valued, they're contributing something.
You're right. I like that. Words we can say more. Say more. That's actually the phrase, say more. Give us an example of this.
Well, when conversations get tense, I think we think, I need to control this more. I need to say something, and sometimes it's say less for us.
Oh, I see.
And so when we say less and we say, tell me more, say more about that. When they're having a problem or they're complaining about something, instead of defending ourselves or rushing to counterattack them, if we just hold back and say, okay, tell me more. What are you thinking about that? What's the problem? How do you mean that? And just let them talk for a while. With daughters, sometimes they just really need to get a lot of things out and give them time and space to say it before we correct them or teach them or try to shape it into a learning moment. Just let them talk.
And as far as strengthening the connection of the relationship, if that's your goal, you say this one phrase is worth reaching for, what would help?
Yes. And this is a little better than our first one of you never and you always and you should. If we, instead of those words that sound so commanding, said, what would help me is if you, and then follow it up. What would help is if you got your homework done a little earlier so we could clean up together.
It's softer, it's more approachable.
Yeah, and what we're teaching them is that we see this relationship as a partnership, not as a dictatorship where I need to tell you everything to do and when and how, but that you're learning how to partner with someone. What would help me is if you called and checked in. What would help me is if you let me do it before you reminded me. Give me time to do it or something. So we just help the other person understand what would work for us a little better.
This was very helpful. Thank you so much. Just a thoughtful approach, too, to those conversations that shape that important relationship is appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.